Good evening. This is Pastor Bob Uzzle from the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Corsicana, Texas. Tonight, I will continue reminiscing about events of this time of year many years ago and give special honor to a dear friend who passed away nearly 4 years ago, my Baylor roommate, Mike Contreras Jr. I have a picture right here. The last time I saw Mike, this was on November 20th, 2015. This was at a funeral home in Waco. Little did I know that would be my last time to see him alive. But Mike was my Baylor roommate, and he was my friend for 43 years. Mike Contreras Jr., like me, is a native of Waco. He was born on June 1st, 1954, which makes him 3 years younger than me. He grew up in the Waco suburb of Belle Meade, where his family attended St. Joseph Catholic Church. And St. Joseph, by the way, is where his funeral was held. He graduated from La Vega High School in 1973. I've been talking about the last few days about events in Waco. On April 19th, 1993, the tragedy occurred in which 76 people lost their lives when the Branch Davidian compound near Elk burned to the ground. Now, I've known about them people for many years prior to this time. It just so happens it was on Good Friday, March the 20th, 1973, I saw a news item in the Waco Tribune-Herald about the story of Esther being put on at New Mount Carmel Center near Elk. It gave the directions as part of the Passover celebration of the Branch Davidians. It sounded interesting. A friend had brought me an Israeli shirt from a trip to the Middle East, and I put it on that night and headed out that way, but I got lost. I couldn't find where it was, and so I gave up and came on back into town. I went to a popular teen dance place called Magic Music. And wandering around that night, that's where I met Mike Contreras Jr. We got to talking. Turned out we had a lot of common interests. We had been involved in politics. In November 1972, both of us had supported the candidacy of Democrat George McGovern. But in the gubernatorial race, we supported a third-party candidate, Ramsey Muniz of La Raza Anita Party. Interesting, the La Raza does not exist anymore, and it's been described as ancient history. Nevertheless, as an aspect of the Chicano movement of the 1970s, La Raza Anita certainly constitutes a very interesting chapter in history. Mike was part of that during that time. We got to talking. He was, at the time, a senior at La Vega High School, about to graduate. His plans in the fall were to begin as a freshman at Baylor University. At the time, I was a senior at Baylor, fixing to graduate. And I was going to return to Baylor that fall to begin working on my master's degree in church state studies. Well, at that time, Magic Music was located on 8th and Washington at what had been a Safeway store. It was during the summer of '73, I was in Virginia at the time, that David Rosen bought the business and moved it across town to 25th and Cole. A lot of Wacoans have fond memories of both of those places of entertainment. It's long gone. Magic Music's been out of business for years, but the memories remain. And but that night, April 21st, 1973, which was I'd said a while ago that the that newspaper article was March 20th. It was April 20th. That was the date. It was 1973, and the event itself was Saturday, April 21st, and it was the night before Easter. Uh, we got to talking, hit it off real well. We went out to Paparolo's and had pizza. That was the beginning of a lifelong friendship, and we started hanging out together a lot and decided to be roommates that fall. Uh, Mike did a number of things that summer. I think he made a trip to California, and I spent the summer, went to a week of sales school in Nashville, Tennessee for Southwestern Company. They sent me to a beautiful Appalachian community called Pulaski, Virginia, where I sold books door to door. Then got back to Waco to enroll in graduate school. The day that I got back, Mike found us an apartment at 1015 Spate near the Baylor campus. By the way, that property was part of the estate of a man named William Galrine, who died in 1968. And it was managed by a Greek American named Tom Bakos. Very interesting guy. We used to joke about him a lot. He passed away in 1994. He was really a good landlord, even though we had a lot of jokes about him, but we'll get into that later. But Mike and I roomed together during the 1973-74 academic year. And at the end of the school year, Mike moved back home to Belmead. I stayed in the apartment alone until December of 1974. I got a job with it was then Department of Public Welfare, now it's Health and Human Services in Teague, and moved to Teague, Texas to begin a new chapter of my life. But our friendship remained. Mike married Tina Lamondola in 1979. Their son, Matthew Michael Contreras, was born on June the 16th, 1992. And shortly afterward, my wife Deborah and I attended his baptism service at St. Joseph. And several years later, Matthew attended the Rappaport Academy on the Waco campus of Paul Quinn College, where I taught at one time. And he went to school with our grandson, Dominic Bass Parker. Thus, our two families have had strong ties down through the years. On April 21st, 1993, Deborah and I had dinner with Mike and Tina at Paparolo's to celebrate 20 years of friendship. Paparolo's had been located, by the way, in Golden Triangle Shopping Center. In 1964, Roland Duty went to work for Pepe's Pizza, as it was called then. In 1969, he bought them out and it became Paparolo's. I believe it was in 1979 they tore down Golden Triangle and Paparolo's moved further down on Valley Mills Drive where they are today. It's a Waco icon. They got wonderful pizza and wonderful atmosphere with movies and a lot of other things. And visited to Waco, Paparolo's is a must on the itinerary. But We ate at Paparolo's April 21st, 1973. Then our wives joined us for dinner there April 21st, 1993. We had I've moved various places over the years, but Mike and I always stayed in touch, and it was in 1993. I did not remember when Easter was that year, so I went to. They didn't have the internet back then, so I went to the microfilm records of the Waco Tribune Herald to try to find out when Easter was in 1973, April 22nd. Okay. By the way, that Easter Sunday morning in '73, Mike and I attended the Easter sunrise service at Waco Memorial Park, sponsored by the Knights Templar. We also went again the following year, 1974. And, we have uh, fond memories from our time together. And usually on April 21st, I would call him on the phone, and we'd at least talk about, our friendship, and meet him on October 21st. October 21st, 2013, we again dined at Paparolo's. This time, Tina had a birthday party. Since Tina wasn't going to be there, Deborah didn't care to go, so Mike and I again met at Paparolo's. And as we were leaving, he said, God has been good to us. We're still here. And after 40 years. By the way, let me backtrack again. It was in September of 1993. By then, that property at 1015 Spate had been sold to a company called University Rentals, but I found out who owned it, and the tenant had no problems with Mike and I coming back by. So we got together, had breakfast in the Baylor Union building, and one of our former mutual professors was there, and we got to see him again, talk with him a little bit. And then we went to 1015 Spate and went through our old apartment again 20 years after the fact. We wanted to do that in 2013, but it wasn't possible. And it was on June 4th, 2014, that Mike met me at Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center, where we visited our mutual friend Doug Miller from Whitney. Doug's been a close friend since '72, and he and Mike had met when we were rooming together, but that was their first contact in many years. After the visit at the hospital, we went by the side of our former apartment and saw massive construction going on, and the apartment's gone now. They got rid of it to make room for some high rise. We both said at the same time, progress. That's sure not my idea of progress. So that apartment is gone, but the memories are still there. On November 20th, 2015, I went to Waco for the funeral of Dr. Weldon Walton, one of my colleagues at Paul Quinn College. That afternoon, I had a visit at Hewitt Senior Care with Dr. Glenn Hilburn, who taught me church history at Baylor, and Dr. Wally Christian, who taught me theology. And I was able to have prayer with both men. Dr. Christian died 10 days later. Dr. Hilburn died the following June. I'm thankful I was able to see them that last time and pray with them. That evening, I went to Wilkerson Hat's funeral home for the visitation of John Garraby, who had managed the Abraxas Club, a legendary R&R place patronized by La Rosanita activists, of which Mike was one. The name Abraxas, by the way, goes back to the Gnostics of 2nd century Egypt. It's an interesting story how the club acquired that name, and maybe we'll talk about that at a later time. But I was able to visit and pray with the family of John Garraby, and Mike was there, and that night at the wake is when this picture was made. We talked on the phone on April 21st, 2016, remembering 43 years of friendship. And then it was on August the 12th, 2016, I received a call from Mike's wife, Tina, telling me Mike had passed away. He went to be with the Lord. He's survived by the love of his life, Tina Marie, his loving son, Matthew Michael, devoted parents, Mike and Mary Contreras, left 4 siblings and their spouses to cherish his memory. And he loved his sisters-in-law, brothers-in-law, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, cousins, too many to mention. Had a passion and natural talent for music. He enjoyed being surrounded by his family, friends, and good food. He was always full of life and always quick to lend a hand. Mike never met a stranger, just his next friend. And so his funeral was on August 15th, 2016 at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Belmead. And interment was in Oakwood Cemetery. We have maintained our friendship with Tina over the years. On November 24th of 2019, Tina came to Corsicana to try to give comfort to Deborah and me. When our son Robert Elton Uzzle passed away, his services were at Griffin Roughton Funeral Home. We appreciate that very much. So 47 years ago, I thank God for bringing me into a friendship with Mike Contreras Jr. We were joking, mentioned about our ex-roommate, our ex-landlord, Tom Backos, the lengths he would go to collect rent from tenants. And I can just see Mike in his mansion in heaven, knock on the door. Tom Backos is wanting to collect his rent. Well, I don't know whether that would happen or not, but I trust they've had some kind of conversation by now. I love you, Mike. We look forward to seeing you again someday. Thank God for Mike Contreras.